Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today on a nice sunny Thursday morning. It's Thursday afternoon, sorry. Welcome to the next session of webinars brought to you by Landbay. You'll be able to find all the webinars, including today's webinar, on our Landbay blog section on the website. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our very own Sadie Harrison, who's going to take you through an educational presentation with a touch of criteria, all about the new government regulations on EPCs and rental properties. I can say from experience, Sadie is certainly passionate in this subject, and this will shine through in her presentation, despite the fact she's got a cold. So please fire away, Sadie.
Thank you, Ian. And can I just say thank you for everyone for registering. It's amazing how many people and some of the questions that are coming through. So yes, I am passionate. I'm passionate about it because I love property. Being from Yorkshire, popular belief, I do like being warm. And I do like saving money. So this is the perfect webinar for me to host, I feel. So if we have a quick look at the agenda. Ooh. There we go. So if you are sat there and you already know who Ian and myself are, or you've used Landbay, that's brilliant. For those of you that don't, we think it's important that you know actually who Landbay are. We're going to look at what's next for buy-to-lets, and part of looking at what's going to come next is also revisiting changes that have already happened for landlords. We're then going to look at EPCs, which is going to cover the EPC overview and also have a look at the minimum energy efficiency standards. We can then sort of have a look at what the new government regulations are. We're going to look at what the impact is to landlords, some of the benefits there and implications. Then we're going to look at how Landbay are supporting the changes. And then if my voice can last that long, that might be where I hand over to Ian to do the criteria highlights and questions. So let's have a look who we are here at Landbay. So about us. So here at Landbay, we are buy-to-let specialists. So we only deal with buy-to-lets, which means we are experts in our field. We were founded by John Goodall, who is a Mr. Webinar himself and has done throughout COVID, has done lots of webinars on the market and the economy. So I'm sure you've already tuned into some of those as well. We lend in England and Wales. So I do know that we do have some questions about Scotland, which we will try and help and assist and do something, but we do currently only lend in England and Wales, and our head office is in London. And because we've only ever dealt with buy-to-lets, we are expert in this field. So when I started collating a lot of the information for the presentation, the changes weren't in the media as much as they are at the moment. So it's really interesting that some of the things that I'm going to make reference to particularly aren't on the slide because they've come out, literally some stuff have come out today as well. So let's have a look at our service. So for those of you that do use us, you'll know that it's full end-to-end digital. So you have a decision in principle within a couple of minutes. It's a soft footprint and we use Equifax. The sort of jewel in the crown is that you have direct underwriter access. So if you've not used us before, it's an absolute massive selling point. We're so proud of all our colleagues, but the underwriters are absolutely fantastic in terms that you can pick up the telephone and have a direct conversation. When a case comes in, the underwriters will ring you, give you their direct telephone numbers and email addresses. And I'm sure you can tell this by looking at me and Ian, but we are definitely experienced. We've been in the industry for a very long time. I go into my 22nd year next year. So you are in very safe and capable hands. And something that we are extremely proud of is our 5-star Trustpilot. And again, we started off having a trophy cabinet. We've now got a trophy room, which we are very proud of. And mostly because they're coming from advisors that are recommending us, and we're winning the awards for everyone that we deal with. Okay, so let's have a look what the future holds. Buy-to-let. So data confirmed by the letting agents today.co.uk shows that the average price for a tenancy in August 2021 was £1,053 per calendar month. Now, if you sat in certain parts, let's say Birmingham upwards, you're probably going to think that that kind of rent's extortionate. If you sat south of the border, you're probably going to think, actually, how can you rent a house so cheap? But that is up at 6.9% from last year. So when we're looking at mortgages, buy-to-let outstanding. So there were 2.02 million outstanding buy-to-let mortgages at the end of June. So when you go back to 2014, that is up 1.65 million. So that's coming from the banking trade body UK Finance. So when we are looking, the market has grown massively. So the English Housing Survey shows that 20% of all households are private rented, and it's 15% in Wales as well. Okay, so there's been lots of changes that are affecting the future of buy-to-lets. COVID, we've all been affected one way or another, whether that's changing how you live, who you live with, where you work, how often you go to work. So we have seen a major shift in, for instance, employees, particularly land-based, for instance, you don't have to come into the office every single day. So we've seen that some of our colleagues potentially have moved out to suburbia rather than being in city centres and not having to travel as much. So people that have been stuck in property with no gardens have decided that they wanted property. Unfortunately, as with anything else, there's been relationships and friendships that have not survived. And also with the increase in demand, there's also been more within the residential market, maybe, where people have decided to go into rented to make sure that they get that sale. So we've had the massive increase of demand, and I don't know any area that hasn't had rental increases, that hasn't had property prices increased. That's been partly stimulated by stamp duty holidays. But our research is suggesting that despite the stamp duty holidays ending, that the market is remaining really robust. So tenants' rights have increased massively, which we will look at slightly. The supply and demand's there, but we are also seeing a shift away from amateur landlords who maybe just want one or two properties, that are deciding that they want to be more professional or semi-professional and treating it like a business. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the changes. They're not in any particular order, so I'm not going to read them out, but as Ian said, there is a copy of the slide after if you like. It's just to show you what landlords have already been through. So EPCs, they came in. We've got the minimum energy efficiency standards, which we'll look at close in a bit more detail. We've had the dreaded taxation that we're just about out of. You've had the introduction of gas safe certificates, the electrical certificates. There's been the HMO regulations for the minimum room sizes. You've had the Article 4, the EWS1 certificates. All this has been done to improve transparency and the condition and energy efficiency and the safety of rental properties for landlords and tenants. So they're all positive things. And what we're going to discuss next in the government guidelines, that's going to be the next thing to go on there. It's not something that's just not going to happen. There's still a lot of information to come out. This is just to show that we're all in it together and look at the kind of changes that we can make, the conversations that we can start having, and still be in a position to maybe shape things. So let's have a look at the EPC. Now, again, a lot of you will have seen, whether it's from being a consumer, buying your own house, selling your own house, or if you're a landlord or you're used to seeing these. These can be found on rental, on the sales particulars when you're buying properties. So just to give a brief outline on there. So this is your energy performance rating. As you can see, you've got your current and your potential. You're looking at an energy score from A to G. I don't think it's any mistake that we'll all be aware that the better the energy rating, the lower the bills will be. And again, that's something that we're going to look at in terms of energy efficiency compared to fuel poverty as well. So it is a legal requirement for a building that's been sold, let, or constructed since 2007. So it tells you the potential scale. The average property is probably no surprise that the majority of properties are a D or an E. The recommendations are there as well, which we'll look at some tips. Again, you might be sat there and you're already aware of all the EPCs. This is a broad brush to make sure that everyone's included and everyone gets something from it. And again, it's worth mentioning that commercial is based on carbon dioxide emissions only. Okay, so this is an example of some of the descriptions that when you do your EPC, that an EPC assessor will be looking at. So things like cavity wall, your roof, your energy. I mean, never has energy efficiency been in the media more than it is now. And again, that's just an example of a recommendation where it shows you that if you were to get solar water or solar panels to improve on there. So that's just a quick example there. So this is the most interesting bit, I feel, that if we revisit what the minimum energy efficiency standards are currently, look at the impact of that from landlords and we just build upon that. So landlords of all domestic, private and rented properties had to comply with the 2008 minimum level of energy on properties. So if you recall the bandings from A to G, it covers all, the regulations covers all domestic, private and rented properties that are either a rural tenancy, a regulated tenancy or domestic agricultural tenancy. So we know that the requirement of an EPC, that if your property has been marketed for sale or let or modified in the last 10 years, then it's pretty likely that you will require an EPC. Now, I'm going to add the caveat about the exemptions, and a lot of the questions have been about exemptions, which we will cover. So unless you're exempt, any property that has an EPC rating of an F or a G, you will be required to take the steps to improve the property. Okay. So I think it's important, if I had £1 for every time I showed somebody how to access an EPC, then I wouldn't be here today. So again, if you've got this saved in your favourite, I have this saved in my favourite with this and Google Earth, because I just think they're massive key. So if anyone rings me to discuss a case, I'm straight in looking at the EPCs, I'm straight in looking at Google Earth. So again, it's just a government website where you can go in, you can put the postcode of the property, and then the example on the right-hand side just shows you, for instance, I've searched an apartment that I know locally, where you can see which energy rating of each one is, whether it's expired. These are the conversations we should be having with our professional landlords. So if you sat there and you look after portfolios, it's really important that you know where to find the information. So it would be on sales particulars. Again, there's some interesting changes that potentially are going to affect letting agents. So at the moment, I believe letting agents have between 7 and 21 days to advertise an EPC if you're selling or renting a property. There is sort of underlying tones of changes like that coming as well, which I think will be important. So unless an owner has opted out, you will be able to access EPCs. I think they're really good to go in and have a look. I know me and Ian were talking, and he'd gone and had a look at his property. I'm sat here in an EPC C rating house and quite smug about it. I think Ian's is a D or something, but you're able to see how you compare to your neighbours and also have a look and see which improvements you could do as well. So, exemptions. So again, I think this is really important to have an awareness. So there are multiple exemptions. I'm just going to highlight them and give a brief overview. But again, the EPC register that I showed you where you can find the properties, there is a link where you can go in and really drill down and get more information. So again, I don't know if you're aware, but there is a cap for improvements to properties, which the cap is £3,500 plus VAT. And it's for a property between the October 2017 to present day. So that's your spending cap to be able to improve these properties that sit between an F and a G. So you can apply for an exemption, and I'll run through each of them now. So you've got all relevant improvements. So that's where you've done all the relevant improvements of the EPC and you still can't get to that E. You apply for the exemption. It's valid for 5 years, and that means that you can continue to let the property out even though it's an F or a G. You've got a high cost exemption. So a high cost exemption is exactly as it sounds, that the cost to improve is way out of the £3,500 cap. So even the cheapest improvement is more than the 3,500 cap. The wall insulation, again, that could be cavity wall insulation. if ever you get the opportunity, just Google it and see what the process is. So it would be somebody that comes around to your property, drills a hole into your wall, and they can fill it with various either polystyrene, foams, all sorts of things to improve the energy efficiency of your property. If the cost of that is over 3,500, but would also impact the structure of your property, then you can apply for a wall insulation exemption. The third party consent is exactly as it sounds. That's where you're relying on maybe a tenant giving you access. It could be an absent freeholder. It could be literally any third party that implicates you from doing that work. So again, you would apply for an exemption for that. Property devaluation. So the minimum energy efficient standards versus EPCs, there are fine lines. So I think one of the questions was asking about heritage properties in grade 2 listed buildings. So you don't necessarily have to have an EPC, but what you can do is you can get a draft copy. And if the property could be downvalued by at least say 5%, then you can apply for an exemption. But generally speaking, heritage properties and the listed buildings don't usually require an EPC unless, again, the minimum energy efficiency standards means that they've had improvements done, or it's been sold, or it's been rented. Temporary exemption due to becoming a landlord. So I don't think that this is widely known. So if you become a landlord and it's kind of thrusted upon you for various reasons, or you're becoming a landlord for the first time, you can apply for a 6-month exemption. And that gives you 6 months where you can continue to let the property and you can start to do the works. It is serious, is this? We need to know about it, and landlords need to be aware of it, because the failure for not having a property with the exemption or being brought up to an E, local authority can charge you 5,000 per property. So it is serious. Drawing your attention to the 5,000 because some of the future changes I'll revert back to when I'll be using this slide. And there's also maybe undertone talks of another exemption coming in, which I know people are asking lots of questions about. Okay, so we've looked at the exemptions. So if you sat there, and this is where we sit now. So this is if you've got a property now and you want to be able to improve the property, how do you do it? And this is the part that's in the media loads and loads, and I've got more and more information that's kind of coming to light. So you've got third party. So if you use a third party, it means that you don't use your own funds. So the £3,500 cap doesn't apply. Now, there are grants available. The grants are changing all the time. So this is just to give you a bit of an awareness. So you can have grants by the Energy Company Obligation, the ECO. And what that is government energy schemes that are to tackle fuel poverty. So there's a section later on about understanding who your tenants are. So grants necessarily might not be available to landlords, but if your landlord is renting to tenants that are classed as fuel poor, for instance, and I've got loads of figures on the EPCs, which I'm going to share with you, but I have to bring myself back because I do get a little bit excited about it. But the grants that are available are there to improve the energy efficiency of the property. You've got various local authority schemes where you can have loft insulation, and it's on everybody's radar to be working together to try and improve the energy efficiency, and also the Green Deal. Now, the Green Deal was announced earlier this year, and it was to tackle 600,000 properties, and they only had an uptake of about 10%, so the scheme stopped. So the interesting details about the scheme that came in, it was to refund £2 for every £3 spent. So anyone that's taken part in the scheme will have a voucher. And it's kind of brought a lot of questions to light, whether you're a residential or a buy-to-let customer. You're going to be thinking, well, are the tradespeople around? So everyone that knows me knows that my house is under construction at the moment. You've got the cost of materials, you've got the actual skilled labour, it's been a bit of a nightmare. So actually taking these grants or getting workmen round, there's also talks about potentially bringing a standard that would protect tenants and consumers, that when work's done, that they're done to a certain standard. So your green deals, what you could do is you could get up to £5,000 towards boilers. You could, if you were renting to somebody that was on working tax credits or low income, you could recuperate up to 100% of your cost up to a value of 10,000. So the principle of it is fantastic. And I know earlier in this week, Boris Johnson, bless him, was announcing other schemes. I've received things through my letterbox only this week to say that I qualify for this boiler. Talking about different boilers, whether it's people I think are concerned about boilers in new builds, they're concerned about boilers at home. Which boiler do I buy? Do I go and buy something that's literally from where you pull the energy from the ground, where you use the airflow system? There's still a lot of information that people are sat waiting because they don't want to make a decision. As with anything, it's like buying an iPhone, isn't it? As soon as you buy an iPhone, the next generation is out and you're already feeling if you'd have waited, you could have gone for an iPhone 13 Pro or something. So that's like the whistle stop tour of the third party. Third party plus own funds means the cap does apply, but you would need to put your own funds in. And if you use your own funds, there's no cap that applies. So if you're lucky enough to have an EPC of a D potential, that you would be able to, I don't know, maybe not go over the 3,500, but make sure drafts are covered in, make sure that you have got suitable double glazing. There are also schemes available if you have a property that is having central heating for the first time. So I think this is going to be the part of the presentation that will evolve, that we will do other presentations about it as the funding, because everyone's worrying about how do I fund all these. Okay, so what's coming? I think everyone will know what's coming. So the government wants to increase the requirement to a C rating for all new tenancies by 2025 and for all existing tenancies by 2028. So according to the latest housing survey, only 2% of homes in England make the A and B grades, which I don't think is surprising. And around 85% are either C or D, and that leaves 13% that are rated E, F or G. Now, interestingly, I've read the government consultation document that's 44 pages, and if anyone wants a copy of it and can't find it on Google, I can share it. There still talks about 10% of the housing markets, the private renting sector, still going to be fit within the exemptions. So they are aware, they're looking at potentially bringing in another exemption that's based on affordability. So there's all sorts of changes. And part of the consultation, which again is not on the slide, but I thought it was worth sharing, is looking at the difference between making a property energy efficient, but some of the changes for energy efficiency might actually not be cheaper from a fuel perspective. So these figures again are, the data is only as good as the data we've got, unfortunately. So these figures are from government 2018-2019. And it's estimated that 3.7% of consumers living in a property that's rated A to C still feel fuel poor. So it's still relatively low, but they're still feeling it. If you're looking at a property that's a band D, 19.5% of those are feeling poor based on fuel. Level E, EPC, you're looking at over 40% of tenants living in there are feeling poor, and F to G increases slightly to 42%. So it's a massive problem, but it's not a problem that's going away. It's a problem for all of us. It's not just a problem for lenders. I think EPCs potentially may change slightly to tweaking some of the changes. I'm really looking forward to looking at some of the questions. This date that's been put forward, it may also change. So I know some of the questions have been potentially about, will it be will it be pushed back slightly? There's even been a paper about what would happen if it was brought forward. So if they brought forward the for new tenancies to 2023 and for existing tenancies by 2025, or would they push it back? So again, we're still waiting for a lot of information. So let's have a look at what we think. I've managed to speak to some of my advisors that deal with large portfolios, some of the actual landlords themselves. So the challenge is that 4 years is not that long away. We're talking about the impacts on how we process mortgages. We're looking at the impact on our land base, certainly looking into how we look at our carbon footprint as a company. We've discussed how the cost implications are huge. So if I was a landlord with multiple properties, it would be making sure that I was familiar with which properties, which EPCs are going to be affected. And landlords are still feeling the impact of COVID. So again, the rights for tenants, potentially about buy-to-let landlords having mortgage holidays. A lot of the landlords that I'm aware of have tried to work with tenants. There's also been some horror stories where tenants have had extended rights, they've not paid rents and they've still been staying there. So landlords are feeling the implication of COVID still. There will be properties that are impossible to change. So again, some of the 3,500 cap per property, for instance, it's been discussed that potentially there might be a cap of 10,000. So the fact that the cap of 10,000 is higher, it might mean that a percentage of the properties that are in E, F or G it may be easier. Some of the grants and funds that are going to be made available, they're looking at potentially some of the discussion points are around landlords that have less than 5 properties, landlords that have more than 5 properties. But some landlords have been really open and said that they might even just sell the properties. So if you have a landlord that doesn't feel that some of the properties they've got within their portfolio are worth keeping, they will be talking about selling. Now, the implications of selling would help potentially first-time buyers enter the property market and increase the stock there. The benefits are that there will be grants and schemes available and more information is coming out. There's also the benefits of having a property that is more energy efficient is it's attracting better quality, longer term rents and tenants. And I think that is important because if a landlord is within the specialist market, you'll be familiar that portfolio landlords do usually have to fill in a business plan. And it's usually multiple questions that within your fact find where you're asking what your intention is. Are you going to buy more properties? Are you just going to maintain what you've got? Are you looking to diversify your spread? Are you going to look into multi-unit real blocks or HMOs? And I think there will be more questions asked about the actual landlord stock of property as well. So there's a lot of opportunities for landlords to acquire poor quality and add value. So I've got a case study that I'll run through with you, but we are already seeing landlords where they have got properties that are unencumbered, where they're looking for hunter pots. So if you can imagine, if you've got a tenant, a landlord that's really into properties within a certain area, and they've done the improvements to their properties, and they know landlords don't, other landlords don't want to improve those properties, we are seeing more cases come to us where they're not necessarily through a letting agent, it's through landlords agreeing to take on stock. So the forward-thinking landlords are already getting the reward for having a green attitude. And we are already seeing the shaping of that as well. Okay, so again, these are some of the recommendations that you see. I do feel that some of the EPCs are going to change slightly. For instance, it's the typical installation costs. Where do they come from? Because again, with the supply of materials, the actual having skilled labourers to do it, the cost is going to be higher. Again, replacing boiler with condensing boiler. When you listen to the media, it's particularly, I think it was a couple of weeks ago in the news, there was an article about a new boiler system that pulled the airflow through, but actually it's based on electricity as well. So it actually makes it more expensive and the cost of electricity is increasing. So I think this part of the EPC may change in the future. So let's have a look at what Landbay have been up to. And again, it's just to give you an understanding of where we're coming from a lender's perspective. I applaud every other lender that's coming into the green market. I don't see it as competition. I see it as variety. I see it as us all working together to protect this industry that we all love, that we all work through together. I haven't seen anyone else do an EPC webinar as yet. Would I want to be involved where there's other lenders on the panel? Absolutely. I think it'd be really interesting to see what valuers feel. You've got to look at, if a property is more energy efficient, is it going to be worth more, not just more saleable, but is it going to be worth more in terms of value? So it's quite exciting, I feel. So what did we do? So we introduced our EPC products quite some time ago now. It's available for small landlords, portfolio landlords, standard properties, small HMOs and multi-unit real blocks. Again, loans from 30,000 to 2 million. We've got up to 75% LTV, and it's for properties that have been registered on the land registry for at least 24 months, and it excludes trading businesses currently. So I've not put the product guide on there just to show you what the rates are. It's just to show you how different and how our diverse investments from the different investors that we've got means that we can really tweak our products, and we're listening all the time. We're always looking for feedback. It's about making sure that we share the information, and we're always looking to evolve. So that's the green products that we have available on our website. If you're not registered with us, do register, because it means that you will get up-to-date information very quickly. It means if there's more webinars, it's really important that you have that contact with your local BDM to keep up to date, to be having these conversations. So looking at the stress testing. So this, I'm just going to use the average rent that I alluded to at the beginning, where the rent of £1,053 on the a month. So on a green product, if we're lending to an SPV on a 5-year fix, we do stress test at pay rate. So when you're looking at the borrowing capacity, so again, it's restricted by your LTVs for your products. But if you've got a landlord that's really wanting to gear up and getting a hunter's pot ready to go and buy other property, or they've already started thinking about how they can improve their current portfolio, it's going to be important to them. So for instance, if you are looking at the maximum borrowing on a 5-year fix compared to a standard, and this is not about excluding or creating tiers, this is about landlords at the moment that have an EPC rating of between an A and C and can tap into these products. So you'd be looking at a maximum lending of 312,000. So you're getting more with your stress testing, and you're getting more because of the lower rate. So that's a difference of 20,000. Coming from Yorkshire, I'm doing a more friendly rental. So if you look at a rental of £600 per month, there's still a difference of 11,000. So 11,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but if you've got a landlord that's wanting to raise money to do some improvements or go and buy more stock, then it's giving them that opportunity. So that's showing you the stress testing, and obviously the benefits of having a lower rate is a better total amount to repay. It's cheaper per month. Okay, so what help is available? It's making sure that you know who your tenants are, so you know who's in there. So we've said that tenants that are on lower incomes, we want to make sure that they are able to access funds and be able to become more energy efficient. There is financial support that is available. So for instance, if your landlord has clients that are over the age of 65, they could qualify for winter allowances. So it's getting that balance between being energy efficient and also the fuel poverty side. And I would just start Googling some of the schemes that are available, but it's going to be more and more of a hot topic. And once we know that there's certainly a market for you wanting to be aware of it. I'm sure as a lender, I'm more than happy with my advisors to be able to be sharing things, there'll be things on LinkedIn as well. So again, the EPCs, although they're valid for 10 years, if you've got a landlord that has improved the property, you can get a new EPC, so you don't have to wait. An EPC, if you're selling your property, it's the responsibility of the person selling the property. If you're renting it, it's the landlord's responsibility to get the EPC. But if you know that you've done the improvements, or you've got landlords that have got an EPC that is valid for 10 years, but they know they've done improvements, they can pay, I think, between £50 and £100. I'm only going off my own experience for my property. You can pay between £50 and £100 to get a new EPC, which means that you could open yourself up to these green products. And concentrate on the quick wins. So I know it's a bit of a no-brainer, but like your light bulbs, and one of the government papers about the changes is they're wanting the private rental sector to be more supportive of the installation of smart meters. So a smart meter means that you're not getting nasty surprises. It's controlling how often the energy suppliers get your usage. An example this weekend is our own direct debit for our property went from £150 to £400. We had to ring the said supplier, which has challenges itself speaking to a person, but literally as soon as we gave the meter reading, we'd gone from actually feeling that we were massively behind because it's all based on estimations, to actually being in credit. It's having that awareness as well, and I think the implementation of smart meters are a good way forward, not just for consumers and for yourself, but also if you're a landlord. So concentrate on your light bulbs, sealing windows and drafts, replacing appliances. So again, EPCs, I don't know if you've noticed, if you go to buy electrical things at the moment, I went to look at a Samsung smart TV that I thought I wanted, and then from the 1st of October, all the EPC ratings are on the side. This particular TV was rated as a G, and I must admit, it put me off. I then started to have a look and see if I could find another TV that was more energy efficient, because something like a TV would be used more and more. I don't know what the TV that I've currently got does, but again, that's not an EPC thing, but it's about the fuel poverty and actually the energy efficiency. So new windows, new doors, boilers, central heating, all things like that. It's about having that conversation and knowing what your landlord's intentions are, how you can assist them, what their thoughts and feelings are on things. So that's the knowing your EPC. So the case study that I want to share with you, I've got multiple case studies, but the one that I'm sharing with you at the moment is a client that bought for cash, just in June this year, paid 110,000. The EPC was a D, so the property could be rented out straight away. They didn't need to improve the property, but the landlord is already thinking ahead of what the changes could be. So rather than put a tenant in now and potentially have the disturbance of moving a tenant out or a period of where there's no rent coming in, they decided that they would spend their own cash buying the property, but do substantial improvements. And the key there is substantial improvements. So new kitchen, bathroom rewire, really bringing the house up and making it more energy efficient and generally improving the property. So at the time, it would have rented out for £700 per calendar month, on the 5-year fixed, for instance, at 3.34. Today's market, which I think the period of time was 6 weeks, is now valued at 135,000, and the EPC rating is a C, so it's lower. So the landlord is benefiting from lower costs. The rent, as the rent market's gone crazy, I think they ended up getting about £850 per calendar month. But also from our perspective as a lender, we can look at a day one remortgage at open market value, which is a massive plus. So if you've got landlords that are looking at bridging, which I think bridging will become more important to landlords from that don't actually have the cash. So anyone that's looking to add value and improve the properties now to save kicking the can further down the road, there's that kind of solution. I've also seen recently landlords switch their appetite from away from older properties potentially to more new build properties. just to protect themselves from having that future headache. So I know that this is just the start of conversations that we are going to be having. And I can't wait for all the questions. I can see them topping up, but because I'm in the slides, I'm sure Ian's going through them all. So I'm looking forward to hearing about them. I'm by no means an expert, but it is something I'm passionate about. And well, the other half and people are reading and watching football and things. I'm quite sad that I'm reading about energy efficiency and things like that. So if we have a look at some of the other criteria, capital raising, we've got the flexibility to lend for all purposes apart from gambling and taxation. Now, one of the other case studies that I could have given you is for a new landlord that literally bought their first property with us. They're due to complete tomorrow. They have got their funding through the business. So they have done an intercompany loan from their trading business, which we do lend to trading businesses within our standard criteria, but they have done an intercompany loan from their recruitment company, and they've set up a subsidiary SPV, and those funds have been introduced, and that's how they're starting to plan their future for retirement and to fit within their plans of being a landlord. So I think we've laboured the day one remortgage at open market value. For anyone sat there that's thinking, all right, I can just get a property and I think I've bought smartly, so therefore it's improved the value, I can go to Landbay. We're not saying that, we're saying substantial improvements. Substantial improvements also includes lease extensions. So what we found is with stamp duty, you could have somebody purchasing, and to try and alleviate the deadline pressures, they now changed to a remortgage with us to make sure that they could complete in time, which there could always be. It's not just a stamp duty thing. There could always be issues. For instance, if somebody wanted to buy at auction or if there were time constraints, but we can look at 75% of the actual purchase price. So even if you've got clients buying but not buying and improving, we can look at those as well. Tenants wise, we've got professional tenants, student lets. Very proud of the fact that Landbay throughout COVID continued to support our portfolio landlords and also landlords within HMOs and multi-unit freehold blocks. We've got minimum values which are Yorkshire friendly, so £65,000 for our standard range. Experienced landlords, again, we look at a minimum income of 15,000 if you've got at least 2 years buy-to-let experience and it's continuous. We can lend to first-time landlords and less experienced landlords. So if they've got less than 24 months experience, we'd look for a minimum income of 25,000. All our lending is currently on interest only. Again, with the stress testing, I've shown you that our 5-year fixed rates are at stress testing. We do allow ex-local authority properties. We can do high rise, we can do short leases, we can do adjoining properties, and I've seen an increase in that, not necessarily the adjoining, we can lend on the adjoining property to a landlord, but we're seeing landlords that want to concentrate in a particular area or a particular location. We're not restricted like some lenders may be. And you will get investment valuations on your HMOs and multi-unit freehold blocks. So Ian, do you want to step in and finish some of the other, tap in on some of the criteria that you're seeing is important while I just grab a drink of water?
Sorry, where are you up to as well? I was...
yeah, so I'm up to minimum value. So HMOs and multi-unit freehold, the minimum value.
5-year fixed rates, yeah.
Yeah, further down.
Thank you. I'll just spend a couple of minutes just finishing off because we've got some great questions that have come in during the process of the webinar, and we also had an awful lot of questions kind of pre-webinar as well. So I'll just very quickly touch upon some of the 5-year fixed rates we offer. We offer one of the lowest 5-year fixed rate pay rates on the market, which essentially enables that landlord to borrow the higher LTVs, the 75% to the 80% on not just the lower value properties, but the higher value properties, because that then matches the loan amounts that we offer at Landbay, up to £2 million. We like ex-local properties in regard to kind of houses. Flats, you are probably best referring on to us to make sure we check some bits in regard to ownership levels. We look at short leases. I think Sadie mentioned that briefly as well. Another couple of little points that are worth knowing: 60 years on application, 55 years at the end. We also don't mind adjoining properties where the clients, one might live to the adjoining property, or for example, buying 2 properties in a row. Again, something that was a question on the Q&A earlier on is specific to HMOs and multi-units, and that's do we lend to HMOs and multi-units, but also what are the types of restrictions. The benefit you have at Landbay with HMOs and multi-units is that we can actually look at what is called an investment valuation, which the broker or landlord that asked the question in regard to what is an Article 4. The 2 and 2 work hand in hand in regard to the benefit that instills with regard to looking at investment values on HMOs for the right type of properties. And just to finish off, just to remind you that the single value properties, we go from £65,000 purchase price. HMOs, we do have specific areas that allow for HMO purchase at £75,000. The normal kind of standard is 120, so do look out for the postcodes that you are allowed £75,000 purchase on HMOs. And lastly, multi-unit freehold blocks, again, something we do a lot of, and again, open to first-time landlords, as is the HMO to 70% LTV. We are at 120,000 minimum value. We don't have a minimum value per unit, but we do have a couple of extra requirements in regard to the size of the units, which is 25 square meters, and the billing split utilities. So I think that draws us to conclusion. We're going to kick off with some questions. I say we've had some great questions through the webinar, but we're going to turn to, if you've not got anything else to add, Sadie, we're going to turn to the first question.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the questions. It's brilliant, actually, and it's really positive and exciting to see, because when there's new changes coming, there's naturally a knee-jerk reaction to it's not going to happen, or it's going to be a massive job. So I do believe that the changes to reducing our carbon footprint is for all of us. I know 2050 seems such a long time away, but I think all working together would be fantastic. I'm just reading that some people have already got solar panels. Some people are looking at replacing boilers. I've got a friend that's just had where you drill into the Earth's core to pull the heat from the Earth. There's all sorts of stuff. I think it's really exciting, and it shouldn't be feared. And anyone within marketing or products, all this needs to with every lender and across the industry, to keep us all great and amazing at what we do, there needs to be that innovation, and I think it is really exciting. So yeah, sorry, I'll let you.
Really great. And I was going to say that there's a commentary from 2 of the people in the webinar, John, who I know well, who's a broker, having a chat with another broker, I assume, in regard to the kind of things they found, and sharing common stories and common case studies as you have will really help kind of shape the market and make sure everyone's aware of the changes and the benefits that are out there. So the first question, as I say, is from Steve Beckett. Thank you, Steve. And he asks, what is the likelihood of having a cost exemption as getting some of the older properties that are C-rated to, that are above C-rated will be near impossible?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Steve has said there. And Steve, I do look after you. So I know you've messaged me already to tell me that my nose looks like Rudolph, so thank you, it's much appreciated. So there's more information to come out. Government, when they did this kind of think tanking, there were 250 people involved. Many were involved from tenants' perspective, landlords, letting agents. It doesn't actually say whether or not anyone from lenders was involved, but I'm sure that there will be more talks coming out. I've read one of the financial reporters posts that have just come through today, and it's talking about if government want us to be energy efficient, they need to give us access to grants, they need to do X, Y, and Z. All totally true. The fact that we're talking about it is fantastic. So you already have the exemptions for high costs. If they look to increase the cap, potentially they are going to increase the cap to potentially £10,000, which means there's more support from a grant perspective. There's also the acknowledgement that properties that are lower rating on EPCs, i.e. your Fs, your Gs, it's going to be harder. I think the average property to get to a C, an average property, is 4,700 to get it to a C, but it's closer to between 10 and 15,000 for the older properties. So the exemptions like, oh, cavity wall ties, it's going to cost more than 3,500. If it doesn't affect the structure or devalue the property, or it's not got a third party, I think there will be more funds available. I'm quite interested in the affordability exemption that's been banded around. So if you've got a landlord that potentially has a high portfolio, but the rental income doesn't support doing these type of improvements, I wonder if there will be more help available. So I think that's definitely a watch this space. I'm sure we'll enjoy debating that when we next speak. So hopefully that answers your question, Steve. If you're still there, you don't need to say yes.
Thank you, Sadie. Yes. Next question's from Jenny Brown. Do you think eco mortgage prisoners could be on the cards, and how will lenders treat properties which have exemption for MWES, which is the minimum energy efficiency standards, as we know?
Yeah, so I think there's probably two parts to that. Any change can always create prisoners. It's how lenders react, and I think every lender will be taking stock on how these changes affect their underwriting, affect their products, affect their not pipeline cases, because it is a way away, but looking at who they're lending to, what the stocks are. I think there will be more and more questions asked about landlords' portfolios. I don't think any lender sets out to create a prisoner. I really don't think they do. In terms of properties, we don't lend on grade 2 listed buildings. However, if you have a landlord that has an exemption, we can lend. I don't know how other lenders stand, but I have checked this out. If you've got someone that's got an exemption certificate that's valid for 5 years, we can look to lend to them. I think it's a moving feast that if we were to lend to somebody with an exemption, and these changes, when they do come in, it's making sure that we keep having that dialogue and that conversation, because there's still acknowledgement that at least 10% of the housing market, the private rented sector, will still continue to have those exemptions. And I think the lift of the cap is not to remove more exemptions. I think it's to make the properties more energy efficient, which is better for the landlord, but also for the tenants in there. A lot of these figures about fuel poverty are from 2018 to 2019. I think if we looked at our bills from 2018 to 2019, just as consumers, the cost of electric and gas has gone up massively. So people that probably weren't once fuel poor are now. You've also got the implication of COVID, so people that have lost jobs and things like that. So I think it's going to be a massive thing. So do I feel that this wonderful industry will go out to create mortgage prisoners? Absolutely not. I think that defeats the whole intention and the feel and the benefit and how we all want this to work out. So I can understand your fear, but I would hope that there would be no prisoners because of this.
Thank you, Sadie. We have a question from Scotland as well, from, I presume, for Fiona McRae. Her phone number is Scottish, so I assume she is from Scotland. She's interested in how Scotland differs from England in regards to EPCs.
Yeah, so we don't lend in Scotland as yet, but I did do my research. So in November 2020, it was outlined that from the 1st of April this year, properties had to, within the private renting sector, had to get to an EPC by 2025 or by 2022 if there was a change in tenants. Now, that is on hold due to COVID, because government were concentrating more on fuel poverty, and it was too soon to come in. But interestingly, what they did look at is increasing grants to around 10,000 per property. And if you had no more than 5 buy-to-lets, you would have access to funding and grants where you could have an interest-free loan. And if you had more than 5 properties and you're classed as a portfolio landlord, you could have access to funds and grants, and the interest rate was 3.5%. So I think everything is kind of watch this space, but I think it shows that there is the support there. It's just like with anything else. We were only hearing about the negativity, and I'm not saying that the scaremongering is not valid, but we need to hear more of the positivity coming down about the changes. So hopefully that
We had John Corrin earlier on that was having a little chat with some other brokers. He's also raised a question which is very pertinent and directed at us as a lender. Should a lender's carbon footprint be one of the determining factors as whether a mortgage is a green or not?
I don't know how to kind of answer that, because I think all businesses have an obligation to be as green as they can. I suppose it would be like the pot calling the kettle black if we were to say, you know, we've got these fantastic green products, but actually it turns out that we're, I don't know, all driving around as BDMs in 5-litre engines and stuff like that. I think these changes, as I keep saying, it's a collaborative change, and it's a change of attitude in terms of, we're doing Zoom now. I'm not stood in a room. We've not all travelled all over the country to do it. But I do think not just the lenders that do green products, I think all lenders and all companies are looking at their footprint. And again, there's other things going on. I'm not involved in the commercial side, but there's other things going on from a commercial perspective, that there are grants available to commercial companies and that awareness and talking about it. So as we are sat here discussing green products, is it Landbay's intention to reduce our carbon footprint as a company? Absolutely, absolutely. And I can't imagine that there's anyone out there that's not considering the same as well.
We've got another question that's close to my heart as well, in regard to the ability for brokers to find the right products, and that's from Damien O'Dwyer. How long would it be before sourcing systems add a field for EPC ratings, do you think?
I can't answer that from the sourcing. I have the pleasure, I'm not going to name the company, but I have the pleasure of looking after a well-known packager in my area, and their own white label system, sourcing system, is already forward thinking and asks about EPCs and actually filters in which products are available for that property, which I think is fabulous. Now, given some of the conversations and calls that we get as BDMs, where sometimes we have to tell an advisor or an intermediary that the client doesn't qualify for that, even though they've sourced it, that they have to look at the more intricacies of the criteria because it's not an EPC, then I think companies, not just lenders and sourcing systems, but I think everyone will look at their own management of CRMs and their own internal processes to make sure that, being energy efficient is great, but it's also being smart with your time and how you plan things. And yeah, I think, there are companies out there, and I have seen firsthand that putting the EPC details in for this particular packager is meaning that they are ahead, like a landlord benefiting from the green products. They are ahead and able to offer that assurity to their advisors as well, that are sourcing, that they can source with confidence that by putting the EPC rating means that they do get the right products.
Fantastic. I think we are drawn to the close. We've got maybe time for one more question, and that was a question that was answered earlier on in the webinar. Is why is it required with regard to properties being registered on LandReg for 24 months? It would be a good thing to reward landlords who have purchased property recently and upgraded EPCs and wanted to remortgage. I think we can answer that one. Can we say?
Sorry, you just broke up then. I think that was my internet.
I'm sorry. Do you want to read the question again? So essentially, how can landlords, if they get a new EPC, then look to refinance? And what are the benefits if you apply? You bought a property from auction perhaps, and then it was a D, and then you had an EPC that was relevant to the auction property. Then, is there any strategy the landlord can take for the new property, for the refurbishment?
Yeah, I think we've probably covered that. I mean, any landlord that's got within their business plan that they want to acquire property via an auction, or like the example that I've given you before in the case study, having that 4 weeks of pain to get the property means that the property is more desirable. It means the property is more energy efficient. It means the properties are cheaper for tenants to live in. You're going to get a better quality, you would hope, of tenant. You should get a cheaper rate. You are ticking a box and then can concentrate on other properties that you might have in your portfolio, or building a property with that EPC rating. I feel that cash and bridging will help out, because there will be landlords that run out of time, definitely. One of my thought processes has been that, as you know, Ian, we only lend on one property at a time. We don't do a carte blanche, let's take all your security into consideration and lend, which some advisors love that, and I know some lenders that do it. I'm more interested in what about those securities that are held under one loan agreement and they're not EPC rated Cs. How easy is it now for landlords thinking that they want something all under one roof for ease, so they just see one direct debit? How easy is it going to be if you want to take that security out to improve it or raise, or, you know, are there any restrictions? As I don't know enough about that type of facility, but I think it's something that a landlord would maybe consider, that wherever you're lending on one particular property, the security is just there, or is there going to be, I'd be asking the questions if you have a lender that, what flexibility is there, because there will be flexibility needed, as there always is. You know, we often get properties brought to us that were, you know, a house that had been split into multiple flats and stuff. So we know that landlords' appetites, tenants' demands change. So I think flexibility and knowledge is going to be key moving forward.
Thank you, Sadie. That brings us to a close. We're going to finish with Sadie rounding things up, I think, or saying thank you. But I think there's another passionate broker in the chat room as well. I think I'm going to put John and Sadie together in a room and discuss all things EPC and green for the next meeting. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Sadie?
Yeah, thank you. It's been overwhelming how many people are interested in it, and I would say start having those conversations with your landlords, speak to your letting agents, because again, there's talks about government being pushing letting agents so that you know, they're only going to be able to market properties within A to C. There's some of the questions there, so if anyone wants a copy of the consultation notes, they are available on Google, but if you fancy having a read of them, it is open to interpretation. But I think the general feel that I get for is that we're all in it together to make a warmer and more energy efficient place for us all and our tenants. But thank you.
Thank you, and we will answer all the questions that have been answered or not answered today at some stage over the next couple of days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think, shall I end the session?